My husband literally stepped over my father, who was actively having a dementia-induced panic attack, just so he could grab his VIP concert tickets from the kitchen counter. I was hyperventilating on the floor from a severe allergic reaction, begging him to call an ambulance, but he said his mother had paid a fortune for the front row seats, and he couldn't let her down. He didn't know the new nanny cam I had just installed in the corner was recording every single second. My throat was swelling shut. Every breath sounded like a broken whistle. "Liam, please," I choked out, my fingers scraping against the cold linoleum floor as I tried to reach his shoes. My dad, Arthur, was huddled against the refrigerator a few feet away, crying out for a wife who had passed away 10 years ago, completely terrified by the chaos. Liam didn't look at my dad. He didn't kneel beside me. Instead, he checked his smartwatch, grabbed his leather jacket, and sighed. "Chloe, you always do this," he muttered, stepping neatly over my legs to reach the marble counter. "You get stressed, you have a mild reaction, and you expect everyone to drop everything. Take a Benadryl. I'm already running late, and my mom is waiting outside the venue." He walked out the front door. I heard the deadbolt click. Then the engine of his car started in the driveway. The sheer absurdity of it almost overpowered the lack of oxygen in my brain. My husband of 4 years had just left me to die on our kitchen floor because missing a classic rock concert would upset his mother. Liam and I had been married for 4 years, but for the last 2, our home in suburban Seattle hadn't belonged to us. It belonged to my father's progressing dementia. When Dad could no longer live alone safely, I moved him into our guest room. I quit my full-time job as a graphic designer, took freelance projects I could only do late at night, and became a full-time caregiver. Liam hated it. He never actually said the words, "I hate your father," because Liam cared too much about sounding like a good person. Instead, he weaponized his patience. He complained about the smell of medical supplies. He sighed heavily when Dad repeated the same question 3 times during dinner. And he constantly ran to his mother, Brenda, seeking validation for how hard his life had become. Brenda loved playing the martyr by proxy. She constantly told Liam that he was sacrificing his youth, that my family burdens were dragging him down, and that he needed to prioritize his own mental health. That was her favorite phrase, mental health. She used it to excuse every selfish decision he ever made. The VIP concert tickets were her latest intervention. A mother-son bonding night to help him escape the toxic environment of our home. I hadn't planned on ruining his night. 30 minutes before he was supposed to leave, I had been making Dad a sandwich. I grabbed what I thought was a plain jar of almond butter, not realizing the grocery delivery service had mixed up the order and sent a mixed nut butter containing macadamia nuts. I am severely, violently allergic to macadamia nuts. I tasted a smudge of it on my thumb. Within seconds, my tongue felt heavy. A minute later, hives erupted across my neck like a map of red fire. By the time Liam walked into the kitchen dressed in his expensive concert outfit, my airway was rapidly closing. I had collapsed near the island. My dad, confused and frightened by my sudden gasping, dropped his plate and started wailing. That was the scene Liam walked into, and he chose the tickets. As the sound of his car faded down the street, darkness started creeping into the edges of my vision. My chest burned. I couldn't pull air into my lungs. My dad was still sobbing against the fridge, his hands covering his ears. I knew if I passed out, I would never wake up, and my father would be left alone in this house with a dead body. "Move," my brain screamed. "Move!" I dragged myself across the floor. My nails tore against the grout. 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet. I reached the bottom drawer of the cabinet where I kept the emergency medical kit. My vision was swimming. Black spots danced violently in front of my eyes. I fumbled with the metal handle, pulled the drawer open, and grabbed the yellow plastic tube of my EpiPen. I pulled the blue safety release off. I gripped it in my fist, swung my arm back, and slammed the orange tip into my outer thigh. The needle pierced my jeans. The medication shot into my muscle. I held it there for 3 agonizing seconds, then collapsed onto my back, panting, waiting for the epinephrine to force my airway open. My heart began to hammer wildly against my ribs. The adrenaline hit my system like a lightning bolt. Slowly, painfully, a thin stream of air made its way into my lungs. I was still shaking, still covered in hives, but I was alive. I pulled my phone from my pocket with trembling, sweaty fingers and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? Anaphylaxis, I wheezed, every syllable tearing at my throat. Used EpiPen. Need an ambulance. Please hurry. Stay on the line, ma'am. Help is on the way. I dropped the phone on my chest. I looked up at the ceiling, then turned my head toward the corner of the kitchen. Hidden behind a decorative potted plant was a tiny black square. The new nanny cam I had installed just 2 days ago to monitor Dad when I was in the shower. Its little blue light was blinking, steady, silent, recording. Liam thought he had left me alone. He thought it was just his word against mine. He didn't realize he had just handed me the weapon that would destroy his entire life. I woke up to the steady, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor and the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room. My throat felt like it had been scrubbed with coarse sandpaper, but air was finally flowing freely into my lungs. A nurse with tired but kind eyes was adjusting the IV line taped to the back of my hand. She told me the EMTs had arrived just in time. The epinephrine from my pen had kept my airway open long enough for them to administer a heavy dose of steroids and antihistamines. As my mind cleared, panic suddenly seized my chest. I tried to sit up, gasping to ask about my dad, but the nurse gently placed a hand on my shoulder, pushing me back down into the pillows. "Your father is completely safe," she assured me softly. "When the paramedics found you, the police also responded because of the vulnerable adult in the house. Your neighbor, a lovely older woman named Mrs. Higgins, saw the lights and came over. She is sitting with your dad in your living room right now. The police filed a standard endangerment incident report just to be safe." I closed my eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. Safe. Dad was safe. The police had documented the scene. Then, I reached for the plastic patient belongings bag at the end of my bed and pulled out my phone. Part of me, the foolish, desperately hopeful part of a wife who had spent 4 years making excuses for her husband, thought Liam's name would be plastered across my lock screen. I expected dozens of missed calls. I expected frantic voicemails asking which hospital I was at. I expected a text saying he was racing through the emergency room lobby doors. There were no missed calls. There were, however, 3 text messages. I opened our chat. The first message had been sent an hour after he left me gasping on the floor. "Mom loved the opening act. Hope your rash went down. Drink some water and go to sleep." The second message was a photo. It was a selfie of Liam and his mother Brenda, standing in the VIP section of the arena. The stage lights were glowing vibrantly behind them. They were both smiling brightly, holding up overpriced plastic cups of beer. Brenda was wearing a sequined blouse, her hair perfectly styled, leaning happily against her son. Liam looked handsome, relaxed, and completely untroubled. The third message arrived just 10 minutes before I woke up. "Mrs. Higgins from across the street just texted me. She said there was an ambulance at our house. Seriously, Chloe? You called 911 over a mild allergy? You completely embarrassed us in front of the entire neighborhood. Don't expect me to rush home from this just because you wanted attention. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Have a good night." I stared at the glowing screen for a very long time. The emergency room around me was loud. Doctors shouting medical orders, machines beeping, privacy curtains being yanked open and closed. But inside my head, everything went perfectly, terrifyingly silent. I didn't cry. My eyes were completely dry. For 2 years, I had believed that Liam's selfishness was just a byproduct of caregiver burnout. I had convinced myself that helping me care for my father was a heavy burden for anyone, and Liam just needed patience to adjust. I had covered for him, defended his absence to my friends, and swallowed my own exhaustion to keep the peace in our house. But looking at that selfie, the illusion shattered permanently. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't struggling. He was just fundamentally cruel. He had stepped over his dying wife to go drink beer with his mother, knew an ambulance had arrived, and his only concern was whether my survival had embarrassed him. I didn't reply to his texts. Instead, I opened the smart home security app on my phone. I clicked on the live feed from the new kitchen nanny cam, then navigated to the recorded events from earlier that evening. I hit play. Watching yourself almost die is a deeply surreal experience. I watched the digital version of myself collapse near the kitchen island, clawing frantically at my throat. I watched my father cowering by the fridge in absolute terror. And then, I watched Liam. The camera caught everything in high definition, with crystal clear audio. I watched him check his smartwatch. I heard him tell me to take a pill, sounding far more annoyed than concerned. I watched him casually lift his expensive leather shoe to step right over my convulsing body, grabbing his tickets from the counter. He didn't even look back as he walked out the door. It wasn't just neglect, it was absolute, chilling indifference. I saved the video directly to my phone's local storage. Then I uploaded it to a secure cloud drive. I forwarded the encrypted link to 3 separate backup email addresses, just to guarantee it could never be deleted. I didn't call Liam to scream at him. I didn't call his mother to curse her out. Instead, I looked at the clock. It was 11:30 p.m. I opened my contacts and found the number for Sarah Caldwell, a college friend who had recently become a junior partner at one of the most ruthless family law firms in Seattle. I typed a single, decisive message. I need a divorce. I have video evidence and a police incident report of extreme negligence and elder endangerment. Call me tomorrow morning. I put the phone face down on the tray table, rested my head against the stiff hospital pillow, and finally let myself sleep. Liam thought he was coming home tomorrow to a wife who would apologize for causing a scene. He had no idea he wasn't coming home to a wife at all. I was discharged from the hospital at 8 a.m. on Sunday. I did not call Liam. I did not go home to wait for a tearful, manipulative apology. Instead, Sarah, my attorney, met me at the hospital with a hired medical transport van. We drove straight to my house. Mrs. Higgins was sitting in the living room, holding my father's hand. He was safe, watching television, completely unaware of the catastrophe that had unfolded the night before. I packed 3 suitcases. I packed my father's medications. At 10:15 a.m., Liam's car pulled into the driveway. He walked through the front door holding an artisan iced coffee, looking mildly annoyed. He stopped when he saw the suitcases lined up by the door, and then he saw Sarah standing in the kitchen wearing a sharp gray suit. "Chloe, what is this?" Liam asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Are you seriously packing a bag because I went to a concert? You had a mild allergy attack. Stop being so dramatic." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply placed my tablet on the kitchen island and pressed play. The audio of my agonizing, gasping breaths filled the kitchen. Liam's recorded voice echoed off the walls. "Take a Benadryl. I'm already running late and my mom is waiting." I watched Liam's face as he saw the high-definition footage. The arrogant smirk vanished instantly. His skin turned the color of wet ash. The man who had spent 4 years curating the perfect image of a devoted husband was suddenly forced to watch himself commit an act of unforgivable cruelty. "You recorded me?" he whispered, horrified. "No," I said calmly. "I recorded my father's kitchen for his safety. You just happened to demonstrate exactly how unsafe this house is." Sarah stepped forward and handed him a thick manila envelope. "Liam Vance," she said crisply, "you are being served with a formal notice of a divorce petition. Based on the police incident report filed last night and this footage, an emergency temporary restraining order is being filed with the duty judge first thing tomorrow morning. You are to vacate this property immediately." "You can't do this!" Liam panicked, dropping his coffee on the counter. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a sudden, desperate fear. "Chloe, please. I panicked. I wasn't thinking straight. Mom was waiting and I made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk," I replied, stepping toward the front door. Stepping over your dying wife so you don't miss an opening act is a choice. The legal battle was supposed to be messy, but paper trails, police reports, and nanny cams have a way of silencing narcissists. When Liam's attorney saw the video, he immediately advised his client to settle. Liam surrendered his equity in the house and agreed to a heavy alimony structure just to keep the footage out of a public trial. But men like Liam and mothers like Brenda can never just walk away quietly. They are too addicted to playing the victim. 2 weeks after the settlement, Brenda posted a long, tearful paragraph in her community church Facebook group. She claimed that I had faked a medical emergency to manipulate her son, that I was mentally unstable, and that I had stolen her son's home. She wanted the neighborhood to pity him. She didn't realize that Mrs. Higgins was also in that Facebook group. Mrs. Higgins didn't argue. She simply replied to the post with the public police report number and the emergency paramedic log that she had witnessed firsthand. Another neighbor, whose sister worked at the county courthouse, pulled the public divorce docket and posted a summary of the reckless endangerment charge. The neighborhood turned on them overnight. Brenda, who had spent decades building her reputation as the perfect suburban matriarch, suddenly couldn't walk into the local grocery store without people turning their backs. Liam's karma was even more precise. He worked as a regional director for a medical device company, a company that prided itself on patient care and ethical healthcare sales. When the neighborhood Facebook post went viral locally, an anonymous community member forwarded the entire thread, including the police docket summary, directly to his company's HR department. You cannot sell life-saving medical equipment when there is a public record of you leaving your own wife to suffocate on a kitchen floor. Liam was terminated immediately pending an internal investigation. 6 months later, my dad and I were sitting on the porch of a new, smaller house in a quieter neighborhood. The air smelled like pine and rain. My dad was drinking tea, smiling at a bird feeder, completely at peace. My throat was healed. My life was my own again. I went back to graphic design, taking clients I loved, breathing freely in a home where I never had to beg for my life. People often think that healing requires a dramatic apology or a tearful reconciliation. But sometimes, healing is just the profound, silent relief of a locked door. It is the realization that you survived the worst thing someone could do to you, and in doing so, you finally learned your own absolute worth. Never let anyone convince you that their convenience is more important than your survival. And if they ever try to step over you, make sure they never get the chance to walk back into your life.